What is up, everybody? It's the artist, and I just watched Disclosure Day, and I wanted to come on here and talk about it. I guess the first thing is this is kind of interesting. We have a sci-fi alien film directed by Steven Spielberg in the year 2026, and of course, Spielberg is iconic. Uh, I feel like Spielberg is a director that, for the most part, everyone kind of loves in various different forms. I feel like some people really like his newer stuff, some people really like his older stuff, and some people really just kind of enjoy themselves throughout kind of everything he makes. And I feel like I kind of step into those shoes. I kind of bounce around a lot with a lot of Spielberg thoughts. I think something like Jaws, of course, is iconic classic film. I'm not the biggest fan of, but I absolutely love Indiana Jones and Minority Report. While I haven't rewatched it in the last 5 or so years, something like that, it's an incredible film. But Spielberg is making a sci-fi movie in 2026, and this is a very interesting one and a very divisive film that I want to talk about and kind of dive into each kind of aspect of it, and also just kind of talk about what I think about it. And yeah, a lot of people have talked about Spielberg's newer stuff not being as good. A lot of people think that. You got films like Ready Player One, which is not great. It's pretty bad, actually. But his last film, The Fablemans, was really enjoyable. I don't think that movie was perfect and necessarily like the best thing ever, but I really enjoyed it, and it was a pretty fun movie overall. But this one immediately intrigued me. You got David Koepp coming back to write it. He's written a bunch of stuff for Spielberg, Jurassic Park. Um, I think he wrote Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but he also wrote last year's Jurassic World Rebirth, which I never actually watched because it looked like shit. But this one interests me. I like Spielberg. I like science fiction. I like alien stories. The cast here is really great. You got Josh O'Connor. He's really really interesting pick. I really like seeing him in movies. He's kind of up and coming with a lot of stuff. I think he was, as much as I'm not the biggest fan of the most recent Knives Out film, I thought he was really good in that. Emily Blunt's been really good in a lot of stuff. I really like her in the Quiet Place movies. But yeah, and with that, does a Spielberg directed sci-fi alien movie need to exist in 2026? Is this movie worth the hype or worth the interest or even worth going seeing? And I think for a lot of people, I think depending on what you're looking for, this might not hit for you. I think personally, this hit not in the best of ways. I feel like I'm pretty mixed on this film overall. I think there's some really excellent stuff in this movie, which I'll get into, but I think there's also some really disappointing aspects of this film. So, yeah, I guess to start off with, I'm gonna go with I guess the marketing of this movie. I feel like the trailers are very much a mixed bag. I think when the first trailer came out for this movie, I was just utterly disappointed because it did not look very good based on that first trailer. But then something about the second trailer like drew me in, and then I was very much like, "Yep, I'm seeing this when this comes out." But I'm not exactly like, yes, I'm super hyped for it. And there's no real reason for that except for that marketing. The trailers aren't particularly, looking back at them, they're not particularly great representations of the film, nor do I think they really do a good job at showing some of the really great stuff about this movie. So, to start off, I think this movie is shot really well. I think the usage of the camera is incredible. I think the standout moment in this movie for me personally is this car chase that happens like I want to say midway through the movie. It's in the trailer. I'll probably have some footage in the video showing the trailer, but there's this really fun, exciting shot where Josh O'Connor is like sneaking around, and you watch the camera get passed between the fence in the shot, and it's all kind of done in almost this like one shot oneer feel, and it's just really exhilarating, and I really enjoyed that aspect of the film specifically. I think with that, the biggest contrast is I feel like I wanted a bit more action for this movie. Scenes like that really show that Spielberg still has it for action, and I really wanted more of it. I think there's a couple times where action could have been there, but they just kind of abandon it. I think the train sequence in the film is a bit dull. I think the over reliance on CGI in that moment really hurt the film, and I think the usage of CGI in this movie also really hurts it. I feel like there's some CGI animals in this movie that look really bad, and you can see them in the trailer, and they kind of like showed them off like they're these spectacle sort of creatures, and there is an aspect to it that makes sense for them to look weird, but they really just end up looking fake, and it's abundantly clear they use CGI. Um, so I guess we'll talk about the story because I think that's a lot of where my problems lie. I think this story really, I think this movie chose a really bad starting point for this story. There's a lot of mystery and intrigue that's trying to be presented throughout this film, and I think they do a bad job at making the intrigue interesting. The movie does something I don't always love, but can work sometimes, is the throwing you right into the story. We see Josh O'Connor's character at like a boxing match, and he's basically in some sort of deal with the Colin Firth uh, villain, and he's kind of forced into a predicament, and we're not really told anything at all. We're like, here's this object, don't squeeze the object too hard, don't do these things, don't just don't do any of these things, and it really rubbed me the wrong way. I feel like this movie opens really badly, and it doesn't really get going, I think, until the Josh O'Connor character reaches this sort of like shack in the like on this farm. I think then the movie gets going pretty well because that's basically when the movie does a okay, here they do an exposition jump of like, okay, here's actually what's going on. Aliens are real. I am the one who stole the secrets about aliens, and you need to help me release this information to the public. And throughout the movie, you get some very interesting stuff that I feel like doesn't really get explained the best way. Coleman Domingo's in this movie, and he's, for how limited his role is in this movie, he's pretty enjoyable. But I think he's pretty enjoyable in most things. He doesn't really. He just kind of shows up, and he's just kind of saying things, and it's all done in this way that's just kind of not presented the best. I think the other issue I have with this movie is I feel like towards the end of the movie they really make it apparent that these two characters, Josh O'Connor and Emily Blunt, are supposed to be like, yeah, they are the people that are going to communicate with the aliens in some degree. But at the end of the day, it feels like the Josh O'Connor character really gets the least interesting aspect of the movie. His role with the aliens is not that interesting. Emily Blunt's thing is interesting, and I think she's the driving force behind this movie, really. I think she kind of carries the movie on her back, and it leads to a lot of like clumsy, a lot of just like it's just a mess. This movie's a mess. You can tell that this script by David Kept is not the best script he could have written. I feel like there is something really good in this movie, a really good story about aliens, about stuff about Disclosure Day as a concept, because it's honestly a question I've always had, and there's little bits and pieces of it, of the idea of like, what if aliens were real? Like, what would that mean? What would that mean for religion? What would it mean for that? And I know I went into this movie, it's probably not what I should have expected from a Spielberg movie, but once this started mentioning these little topics about aliens and how they affect religion, how they affect our society and stuff like that, the movie doesn't really do a good job at even showing that. They have this long third act that I think is pretty great overall. I really enjoyed it. Basically, throughout the watching this movie, I kind of was bored, and I was kind of like, this better have a great payoff. And I would say it had a good payoff. It didn't necessarily blow me away, but I was like, okay, I'm pretty engaged here. I think I think my main issues go with the script. I think this movie should have started with something with Josh O'Connor's character maybe taking the data from the company, getting out of there, and then we have this wrestling sequence and stuff like that. I think maybe even figuring out a better path for Josh O'Connor's character, make it more clear, like what is his role communicating with the aliens, because he is supposed to be the communicator with the aliens, but he only uses it in the final scene. I think the movie could have cut some bits out or maybe restructured things so that we get more of this sort of final act chapter of like, now that aliens are confirmed to be real, what does this mean for society? And I kind of would love like a, almost like a, here's like a 6 months later just to kind of check in on the world. And I feel like with that, the movie does a really weird thing with that sort of idea with there being this war. There's basically World War III going on at the same time this movie, which I totally get is the idea of like, okay, this war doesn't even matter if aliens are real. Very true. However, I feel like it doesn't do a great job at conveying this idea of Disclosure Day. I feel like it has ideas and themes that it wants to explore, but it never really does. I think sometimes the idea of the character doesn't really make much sense for the story. I think the there's some parts with action that could have been, this movie could have been more action packed. I think there's sequences that could have been interesting. There's a sequence at the end that um could have led into an action scene and it never did. I think I think the main thing is like technically this movie is really beautiful and looks really good for the most part, but I think from a script level this movie needed more time or like a straight up like rewrite. I kind of think this movie suffered heavily because of that script. I think it could have been really great, but it wasn't. I think looking at Spielberg's filmography, he has so many classic films that show have way better themes. I think something like E.T., even though these are okay, it's gonna give me that. So even though E.T. is a film that, what the hell is going on with my fucking screen? I think something like E.T. does a really great job at exploring aliens and specifically them like arriving on Earth. I haven't seen Close Encounters or War of the Worlds yet. I do want to check these out because I do have a very strong interest in these two movies. But Disclosure Day is just okay. I feel like it could have been better, and I'm maybe wondering if it will hold up better on a rewatch. I think knowing all the information that's going on in the movie might help it, but I'm not so sure. So Disclosure Day, I'm thinking a 6 on this for now. I'm leaning more towards like a 5 out of 10. It's kind of down the middle. I think there's some really great cinematography in this movie. I think it's well directed. I just think the script needs a lot of work. Bad CGI animals, of course, and I think the performances from the leads are pretty good. As much as Josh O'Connor, I feel like his character could be like his role should have been more expanded, especially towards the end. I think he does a really good job in this role. I really enjoyed seeing him in this sort of different role from the two I've seen of him, of like Knives Out and Challengers. I think he does a really great job in this movie, even if his role's a bit muddled. But yeah, Disclosure Day, feeling a 6 out of 10. Check it out if you want to. Oh, and I completely forgot to mention this right before I go. John Williams doing the score was really great. I think John Williams did a great job with the music. This is classic John Williams to a great. It really sells that Spielberg energy with sort of motifs that I'm like, that's John Williams and that feels Indiana Jonesy, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I definitely want to check out the score on its own because it was a lot of fun. I can't believe I almost like forgot that because the score is really enjoyable in this movie. But yeah, Disclosure Day, solid movie. Check it out if you want to. Yeah, this has been the artist talks about Disclosure Day. Thank you.